Well, welcome everybody to today's installment of the Elevate to Even Plus Role Model Speaker Series. I am thrilled to have with us today Nora Ali, who I will give an introduction to in one moment. But I also want to reintroduce Sarima Marshall, who on our last speaker series call was introduced with a longer introduction. I won't go through the whole thing today, but just to put some context around it, Sarima is a two-time alum of Elevate to Even Plus, having interned with us for two summers. This year, she is working with us as our host. She's going to be the person facilitating the conversation. She's a rising senior at Emory University and is pursuing a career in media, television, and film. Earlier this summer, she had an internship at the Cannes Film Festival in France, which is just absolutely amazing. So we'll have to do a speaker series event with you, Sarima, to tell us about that. But so I'll pull Sarima in a second. But just before then, I want to thank Nora Ali for joining us. We did circulate her bio, and it is also available on our website under intern resources. If you just click through the links, you can find it. So I'm not going to go through the exhaustive description, but I do want to say a few things about Nora that I think she's got a really cool life story. Let me just say that. She is a first generation Somali American. She grew up in New Jersey. She achieved academic success in high school, also college. She went to Johns Hopkins. She also attended Cornell Law School, where she acquired her JD. She, in her past, has done volunteer work where she did go back to Somaliland and do volunteering at a maternity hospital there. She also, earlier in her career, worked for Family Promise. Family Promise is one of our founding partners. They are now a 4-year host of interns with us. So lots of connections. One other connection, she and I are both married to people from South Dakota. So how many people can say that? I don't think there are that many. But Nora has a really cool story to share. So I'm going to be quiet and get out of the way and hand it over to Sarima to take us from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And hello, Nora. It's amazing to meet you. I guess we kind of didn't get our, a previous correspondence. So this is my first introduction to you as well. So it's lovely to meet you.
Likewise.
To kind of begin with your childhood and your upbringing. So our first kind of introduction question is, how did your upbringing impact your academic journey and your choice of career?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as Andrew mentioned, I'm first generation. Both my parents are immigrants from Somalia and came over at different times. And it definitely impacted both my childhood and why I decided to become a lawyer. My dad came to the US when he was 16, and he achieved academic success very quickly. He graduated third in his class from Summit High School, got into Yale for college, but dealt with challenges because he wasn't a US citizen yet. And so he ended up getting a great job as an engineer, and he got patents in things that I don't understand, like fiber optics. Similarly, my mom is really accomplished, came to the US in her early 20s and is a nurse and has been a nurse for the last 25 years. And growing up, even though both my parents are really smart and talented, there were just a lot of things they didn't know about how the system works in the US. Because they didn't grow up here and didn't understand that education system. So I'm the oldest and I'm the only daughter. And in that role, you just kind of learn to be kind of a third parent in a lot of ways, and have to figure out a lot of things on your own. So things like applying to college, like my dad did apply to college, but he didn't understand things like SAT prep courses or the Common App, or like why you should visit colleges. He was just kind of like, I just filled out a paper form and did what my teachers told me, and that was it. But he didn't really learn how to advocate for himself. And so it was hard at times growing up because I had to try to figure out how to navigate things and advocate for myself. For example, I know Maggie is on the call, and Maggie and I grew up in the same town. And we both went to a magnet high school, and it was a high school that was pretty new. It was for math and science, and you had to take a test and go through a separate application process to go there. And when I told my parents I wanted to go to a different school than the school in our town, my parents didn't really understand why I wanted to do something different. They were like, just go to school, work hard, get good grades, and then you can go to Harvard. And I was just like, that's not how things work. So there's just like a lot of moments like that growing up where I was just like, I feel like I'm struggling to understand the best way to navigate things. And because I didn't have someone who had gone through it before, I didn't know who to ask. Separately, it was interesting growing up where I did. I grew up in Fanwood, which is a lovely town, but it's a predominantly white town. When I was in middle school, 9/11 happened, and there were very few Muslim Americans like me and my brother. Not a lot of Black students, but some, very few African students. So there were a lot of times where it was just hard to figure out how to navigate certain situations because I didn't grow up that way. So I remember, for example, after 5th grade, my parents made me go to Somalia to learn like how they grew up. They thought I was like too privileged. And so they were like, you're going to go to the hut that your mom grew up in and figure how to navigate this summer. And I remember going back to 6th grade and like in homeroom, the teachers was like, what did you guys do over the summer? And a lot of people said, I went to like sleepaway camp, or I went on this like cool family vacation, or I went to the shore. And then I said, oh, I was like in Africa in the desert and I learned how to use a gun and learned how to like kill a goat for food. And people were just looking at me like I was crazy. They were like, who is this girl? And I just felt very other in a lot of ways. And another situation that kind of made me feel like, okay, I need to learn how to be able to advocate for myself, just not educationally, but personally, was an experience where my middle brother, who's a couple years younger than me, had an incident at school where someone called him the N-word and my brother hit him. And my brother got suspended, but the student who said the N-word faced no punishment. And at the time, my brother was in middle school and I was in high school. And I was really upset about it. And my mom was like, well, I don't know how to explain to the vice principal that it's wrong to just punish one student. Even if like one did physical violence, there's still some other kind of violence in saying harmful words. And so my mom pulled me out of school for the day so I could go advocate to the vice principal of our middle school and say, hey, like, it's not okay to not let this kid have any punishment at all. It doesn't have to be the same as my brother's, but he needs to know that it's not okay. And that vice principal said basically like, too bad, so sad. And I remember just feeling very frustrated because I thought if I knew a better way to persuade him, or knew the right words, or knew the right way to approach the situation, like maybe the vice principal wasn't the right person to go to, maybe I should have gone above him, for example, it would have been a different outcome. And so as I was just growing up, I initially thought I would be a doctor because that's basically what all immigrant kids are supposed to do. But I just was like, okay, if I become a doctor, like that sounds great, but I'm not interested in it. And it also doesn't give me this satisfaction of being the kind of person who, if you're thrown into a situation, you figure out how to handle it. Like, I just wanted to be the kind of person where like, I wasn't taken by surprise when things came up that I wasn't familiar with, because I would like quickly absorb it and be able to come up with a strategy for how to handle it. Through undergrad and just talking with people, I learned that law could be that way, where, you know, especially in the role that I'm in now, which is a litigator, and a litigator is somebody who is the person in court. So like, they're the ones who are like advocating in court on behalf of their client. Those are people who have to be like prepared to handle anything that comes up, like a surprise witness or anything like that. And you have to figure out how to navigate and not be so shaken up by the surprise that you can't get the job done. And I was just like, I want to be like that. I want to be the kind of person who can answer things as they come up. And it definitely is a product of my childhood and feeling like at times I didn't have that certainty or understanding of what was happening or how to handle it.
First of all, thank you for sharing that very like personal story. And definitely I can relate to you in that I'm also an only daughter. Both my parents are also immigrants. They did want me to be a doctor. I totally understand everything that you were saying. And I think that just the fact that you wanted to not only advocate for your brother, but for yourself and for your family. And I would assume the many doors that you're opening up in your position as a litigator, that's amazing and phenomenal. So definitely amazing story. Then already kind of explained what litigation is, but can you explain to us your day-to-day experience as an associate senior legal counsel at Adobe?
Yeah, of course. And I can kind of talk about like what my last 9 years of being a lawyer has been like, just to, because I've had a couple different litigator roles, but essentially a litigator's job, and my job now is to help the company either defend itself in cases that they're being sued, or figure out whether or not we should file a lawsuit against someone, and if so, like how do we defend ourselves? And there's a couple different stages in litigation, like you see a lot in like on TV. It's not that much fun. Sometimes it can be, but not always. The way it works is like someone files a lawsuit, and then you have to file a response to it. And then the next stage of this case is called discovery, which is when the parties either exchange documents or information related to the case. And so that's when typically depositions happen. And that is when somebody who has information relevant to the lawsuit is basically interviewed by lawyers for a day to figure out what they know. And people will show like exhibits, which are like either documents or emails that are relevant to the lawsuit. And then after discovery is over is trial. A lot of cases don't actually go to trial. A lot of cases end before then, in part because litigating is very expensive. You have to get usually like an outside law firm to represent you. You have to have them like analyze the legal risks to the business. And then the actual process of like requesting documents, reviewing them, and then people taking your documents and figuring out what documents to give them and having them review it, and then depositions. It's just a lot of time. Like the volume of documents and information you're dealing with is usually in the millions. And so lawsuits take a long time. And I should preface by saying also I'm a civil litigator, meaning I don't do anything criminal related. It's mostly like either like, businesses suing each other, or like an employment lawsuit, or a lawsuit related to like privacy, like, if there's like a data breach, things like that. So those are the kind of cases I work on. Like I mentioned, it takes a long time to go to trial. And what my job is being in a company is to both help our outside lawyers figure out like the best defense and support them through the case, like figuring out who the right witnesses are at the company, or how to find the documents that are relevant, as well as educate the business, or like in this situation, like Adobe or the company I'm working at, on, hey, here are legal risks that we are facing. And so like, should we consider making changes, or, is this a risk that the business wants to take? The law is gray in a lot of ways. It's not like you can like read a law and it says like, as long as you do steps 1, 2, and 3, you won't get sued. And so you have to figure out what's the most reasonable interpretation of the law. And you have to figure out like what appetite the company has for the risks related to it. So you can be like, hey, here's a recommendation I make, but there's like a 75% chance you get sued. And like, are you willing to pay? Is your part of the business willing to pay for us if we do get sued? So it's a lot of like managing people.
And can I ask, what was the steps between you graduating from Cornell Law School and then attaining this current position?
Yeah, great question. So at Cornell, so the way that getting jobs generally in law school works is you get them pretty early. So law school is 3 years. Your first year, you just have to really focus on getting good grades. And then the summer between your first and second year is when you start interviewing for law firm jobs. That will be the job that you have your next summer. And assuming you do well that next summer, then you end up getting a full-time offer after you graduate. And a lot of times you don't really even know what kind of law you want to do. So it's really hard to, like after the first year of law school, decide what you want to do. And in my experience, I was really lucky that the firm that I got an offer from was a full service firm, meaning they did all kinds of things. They did like litigation, but they also did like corporate work. So that could be a situation like if a company wants to buy another company, like what are the legal steps you need to do to purchase that company? or like private funds work, which candidly, I don't even know what that means, but it just seems like there's money involved. I don't know, stuff that I didn't do. So I went to a full service firm during my second year summer, 2L summer. And it was there that I got to like get exposure to a bunch of different areas and figure out what I wanted to do. And while I knew that like litigation was very attractive, and so there were some mentors that I had that were pushing me away from litigation because the exit options, if you're a litigator, can be a little bit less exciting or lucrative than like if you are the kind of attorney that does corporate work, like the purchasing another company or selling that company. So I wasn't sure if I was going to do litigation, but then during that summer, we had the opportunity to go sit in on a 1 day of trial that was going on, that just happened to be going on that same summer. And one of the partners of the firm was cross-examining an expert, which means it was the other side's expert. And it was like an expert in something environmental related. It was very technical. And the attorney for the firm that I was at was asking him questions to basically eviscerate his expert opinion. So like if his expert opinion was A, this lawyer was asking him a bunch of questions so that at the end of the day, the judge and jury's conclusion was like, A is not true. This guy was wrong. Mm-hmm. And I was just like in awe. I was just like, wow, like this guy has like a PhD from Princeton. He is so smart on paper. And this guy who has no science background managed to learn so much about this area of the law or this area of like environmental science or something like that, such that he can put some dude with a PhD from Princeton to shame. I was just like, I want to be like that when I grow up. I want to be able to like become an expert in an area and like know it so well that I can outsmart the expert in that area. And so that's the day that I decided I was definitely going to become a litigator and not do something else.
Right. And was there mentors or any other advice that you got that further pushed you into litigation or that helped kind of solidify your stance on even going to law school and making that decision?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I don't know if I had any clear mentors that were like, go to law school and go to a great law school. It's actually the opposite. I feel like, I'm curious if Maggie feels the same way, but we can talk offline about this. But our guidance counselor in high school sucked. And she was pretty young and new, but she did not empower or advocate for me the way I had wanted. So when I applied to colleges, I could only apply to a few because my parents weren't paying for my applications, and I worked at a local movie theater making $5.25 an hour, which was what minimum wage was back then. So I was like, I'm applying to 6 schools. And some of them will be reaches, some will be ones that, like I definitely know I can get into. And one of those schools was Hopkins, which is where I ended up going. And I remember telling the guidance counselor, hey, I'm applying to these schools. And she told me I had too many reaches and that like I should like completely revamp my list. And I didn't listen to her. And then I got into Hopkins, and I remember clearly when I went to her office to tell her that I got into Hopkins, because we were supposed to update her every time we got into a new school for her records. And she said, Johns Hopkins? I was like, yes. And she didn't even seem happy. Like after her shock, it wasn't like congrats. It was just like, oh. And that stuck with me because you would think that somebody like me getting into Hopkins made the school look good. Wow. And in a lot of ways, the school just didn't know how to properly advocate for me. And I dealt with the same thing in college. When I took the LSAT the first time, I went to meet with the law school advisor, and same thing. She told me like a bunch of safety schools. And I was like, well, these are the schools I really want to go to because I know if I get into like a certain rank of schools, I will get a good firm job after. And same thing. She was like, well, your GPA isn't that great. And so I don't think you should like waste your money applying to that. And I didn't listen. And I got into a lot of great schools, including Cornell. And then this happened again in law school. So in law school, there's an opportunity for that's really attractive to litigators called clerkships, which is an opportunity to work for a judge after you graduate. And it's really helpful because you kind of learn how judges think and operate, but it's also really hard to get, especially for a federal judge, because there's not a ton of them. So I applied. I went to the guidance counselor that like oversaw clerkships and said, hey, I want to apply for a clerkship. And she said, well, here are 3 people with your GPA that got a clerkship in the last 10 years, but there were the only 3 that got it. So like, I wouldn't bother applying. And I think at that point, I was just tired of having people tell me that I couldn't do something, especially when I've done it before. Yeah. And like, I'd rather have the judge tell me no than someone who's hired to help students get the job tell me no. So I instead went to the dean of the law school and said, hey, candidly, this woman is tripping. Her job is supposed to help me get a clerkship. Me getting a clerkship makes the law school look good, and other students getting clerkships make the law schools do good. So what is happening? Why am I being discouraged from something that would be a benefit to me and it benefits the law school? And he completely agreed. And so our agreement was I would apply for clerkships and he would call the judges personally, say, hey, you should definitely give Nora a chance and here's why. And I ended up getting a clerkship. And I remember when I clerked, my judge told me that during one of my rec letters said something about how my grades weren't that great. And she was like, all your grades were like A's and B's. Those were excellent grades. But, you know, just sometimes you just are dealing with haters in life and you have to find the people who are not the haters to give you opportunities. So your question was, did I find a mentor? And I went through this whole thing. The answer was like, not really through that avenue, but since then I have found great mentors. Like the judge I worked for is an amazing mentor and somebody that I talk to regularly, both for professional advice and personal advice. And then I networked before law school. I met somebody who was a corporate lawyer who has also been really good at just giving me general advice, but not specifically to litigation.
Mm-hmm. And you brought up kind of one of our key words, which is like networking. And so my next question is like, how do you maintain your connections with your mentors? And like, did networking come naturally to you, or did you, I guess, pick up skills and tips and tricks that allowed you to continue networking?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to answer the second part first about like, did networking come naturally to me? Absolutely not. I am pretty introverted, and I think also coming from the culture I came from, girls aren't really encouraged to speak up and ask for things or have a presence. Like the ideal Somali girl when I was growing up was like a girl that was quiet and people didn't know she was there unless she was helping people. And so networking is like kind of the polar opposite of how I was raised, because it's me reaching out to people and asking them for advice in their time. And it just felt like I was imposing. But I also quickly learned before law school, I went to a couple networking events that were like Cornell Law focused. And I learned I knew nothing. Like I didn't know what a litigator was then. I knew there was like a kind of lawyer that goes to court and like there are corporate lawyers, but I didn't know what corporate lawyer meant. And it felt like a bunch of people that were also applying to law school knew way more than me. And I was like, I am going to be at a disadvantage if I don't try to level the playing field a little bit by at least knowing some of the terminology or lingo or meeting people in this area. Because at that time, I just didn't know what I didn't know. I would just like hear terms and be like, okay, that's a thing. That's a legal thing, but I didn't know what else to do with it. So I remember going to specifically a Cornell Law alumni event where they also invited admitted students and was focused on Black and Latino alum. And when I was there, I just started talking to this woman who I was just like, oh, she's a Black woman. I'm just gonna say hi to her. And then we found out that we're both in sororities, although she's an AKA and I'm a Delta. We're like, okay, like we're both sister Greeks. And you know, I talked to her about how like Cornell seems really great, but I'm not sure if I'm going to go there. I'm thinking about other schools, and asked her for her experience. And afterwards, she gave me her business card. And I just continued to update her as like significant things happen. So during that conversation, she mentioned an internship program for pre-law school students called SEO. And she said that, oh, she's been involved at her firm with having SEO interns and I should apply to it. So I ended up applying to it. And when I got in, I reached out to her to say, hey, I got in. That summer when I was working at a firm in New York, I reached out a couple times to be like, oh, hey, can we grab coffee? Since like we're both working in Manhattan. And then that just helped build the foundation of the relationship. So then like, she was like, let me know how like 1L year is going. So like, I was like, oh, hey, I'm updating on how 1L year is going. Or, she would ask me at one session, like, okay, I'm glad to hear 1L is going well. Let me know how the 2L job process goes for you and like, make sure to apply to my firm. So I continue we'd have conversations and then she'd be like, let me know about the next phase. And I made sure to circle back when I got to that next phase. And so I met her in January 2012. And we still talk at least a couple times a year. And she's does a completely different area of law than me, but there's still so many things I can learn from her about how to advance. She's currently a general counsel of an international company, which is the like top lawyer role for a company. And I don't know if that's what I want, but hearing about her experience getting to that role makes me think, okay, these are the things or skills I need to accomplish if I do want to get there. And because we've like continued to talk, she's been more candid with me about any kind of guidance or feedback she has, because she realizes I'm receptive to it. So like now we have this level of trust because she's given me comments and I'm like noted and I adapt that, implement it, and then I let her know that I did it. So yeah, networking doesn't come natural to me, but I do think it's important to try to do it. And I think to make myself feel less uncomfortable, I've tried to think about it as I am sincerely and genuinely trying to learn more. I'm not trying to get a job from you. I'm not trying to use you in some way. I just know nothing and I would appreciate any input you have. Like, I think if you're reaching out to someone solely for a job, then it feels icky. But if you're like, hey, you're just somebody who knows so much about this area that I'm interested in, I don't know anything. Could you please tell me about how you got there or how I can get there? People are so receptive to that. And I've never dealt with anyone. I don't think I've ever dealt with someone being like, no, I will not communicate with you. There's some people who've ignored me. And that's totally fine. They're busy. There's a lot more people who are willing to share kind of their wisdom and guidance.
Definitely. And definitely networking is about curiosity and also kind of making a connection with that person, whether it's in their field or just on a personal level, getting to know them. Definitely.
Yeah. And like I was gonna say, if anyone here is interested in law or has a friend that's interested in law, I'm always happy to talk about it because I just remember when I didn't know anything about it. And so I'm a very open person. I grew up in watching Oprah. So like, there's like nothing that's off limits to me. I'm happy to share everything from my experience. So yeah, if anybody has a lawyer friend or anything, or somebody who's interested in law, just let me know.
Yes, please do. And also you talked about SEO internship. Was that one of many internships that you had been through or through that application process, or were there internships before or after that helped you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think SEO is the best internship I've had. I've always had a job. Like my first job was at 16 at a nursing home, like always worked. But SEO I think was like the best internship because the group of people that were involved with SEO are so focused on empowering the next generation in like whatever field you're getting an internship in. So like SEO also has like a business intern program. I just did the law program. And also the people that you meet through SEO are just so talented. Like the people that were in my class, I mean, some of these people are doing really incredible things right now. So it's just also like great to start your network that way with SEO. I will say my other internships were not that great. And I think it was, it's a reflection of how little I knew when I went into college. So like, I didn't know about like certain scholarship programs or internships or like when to apply for internships. I was just like, okay, like it's May, I have nothing to do this summer, so let me go apply for things. And it's like, everyone got their internship in the fall, like I'm way too late. So I had a lot of very odd jobs in college. Like for one summer, I interned at Princeton during the day, and then I worked at Stop and Shop at night because I wasn't making a lot of money at Princeton. So yeah, I think SEO is definitely by far the best internship experience I've had.
And it's so funny that you said that because I got into SEO career for their business.
Oh,
because there's so many people at Emory at my school that I go to. And
yeah.
I was like, about SEO, I need to apply. And so I did. So that.
Oh, that's awesome. Congrats.
Thank you, thank you. I'm trying to think, are there any other questions that interns have that they would like to ask right now, either in the chat or you can let me know while I ruminate on some more questions?
Hi, Karima. Hi, Nora. I have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm also a first generation on my mom's side, and my dad was killed on 9/11. He was a firefighter, first responder in the South Tower. So I think we all have our own adversities that we face. But you'd mentioned um, environmentalism and I'm interested. So my background is in environments, and I'm just interested in what kind of have you guys seen any demands in like regulations, environmental regulations, or if there's any sort of avenues or positions that are related to law, but directed in that field.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've worked on some environmental related cases, and I think the areas that are big are toxic tort cases, which are essentially people who've been harmed by something in the environment. So like, was there an oil spill in this area, or like, did a company have a factory or facility and didn't have like proper disposal, and so now people in this area are sick. And so I think there's a lot of law adjacent areas there. There's a lot of I feel like consulting opportunities with environmental companies where the law firms don't really understand anything about the environment, and they have to go retain people who are consultants or experts in this area. And a lot of consulting companies will have people who are like junior, like as an entry-level career, just to kind of do like the grunt work of those cases, like actually going to those areas, talking to people, understanding like what the business that may have like been responsible for the leak did, so you can understand kind of like what the actual leak was or things like that. So I would encourage a consulting related role, maybe as a way to work on legal cases but not have to like be a lawyer. And also, thank you for sharing your story and your background. I mean, your dad's story is incredible, and I'm sorry that happened, but thank you for sharing that.
Oh no, I appreciate it. I feel like whenever someone mentions 9/11, I feel like I gotta give him some space. So I
Absolutely.
appreciate your expertise and your story as well. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much. Any other questions?
A couple of questions in the chat, Sarima, would it be helpful if I read them?
Yes, please.
So Alan, I know Alan is an aspiring lawyer, and he has asked a very good question. Wondering your thoughts on going straight into law school after undergrad versus taking time to work before applying.
Yeah, that's a great question. I am in big favor of taking time between undergrad and law school for a couple of reasons. One is it's just good to get work experience and like understand how it is to deal with a 9 to 5 before you have a really intense, difficult job of being a lawyer. So between undergrad and law school, I worked at Family Promise. And I remember I struggled with like being alert and present from 9 to 5, because like in school, you have so many breaks throughout the day, and like not every day is the same. And there were days that I definitely napped in my car during lunch because I was just like, this day is so long. And like, I think it's really good to just learn how to be an adult before you go to law school. And I think it'll also help and frame your experience, and also make you more excited for law school, kind of the grind that is involved with it. And then candidly, once you're a lawyer, you're going to be a lawyer for the rest of your life. And it's sometimes so disheartening to think, oh, I've been a lawyer for about 10 years. And we're doing this for like another 20 or 30. Like, I wish I took 5 years off, maybe 10. Like, the money is nice, but I feel like I didn't get enough time to actually enjoy my 20s, because being a lawyer is really hard and demanding. Like, for context, at my first job, at my first law firm, I would get into the office around 9-10, and most days I would not leave before 9 p.m., but more often than not, I was there till like 11. And then you go home and then you still do a little bit more work. So it's just, and that's your whole life. Like, there was no time to date. no time to try new restaurants. It was just, all I did was work. So I support having a life, Alan, before it's all over.
Mhm. Great response. So Jessica said, "Hi Nora, how did you prep for the LSAT? When did you take it?"
Yeah, that's a great question, Jessica. So I took it twice. I took it once during undergrad and then once the month after I graduated. And I feel like the first time I just wasn't really prepared. I took like a Kaplan LSAT course and my score improved decently, but not enough to get into the top law schools. And so before I took it the second time, I did like a 3-month strategy plan where I don't know if the LSAT has changed topics since I took it in 2011, but there were 3 subject areas. It was logical reasoning, reading comprehension, and logic games. And logic reasoning was like, there was 2 sections of that on every LSAT, and there would be 1 section of the other 2. And so I started a 3-month course of like personal course where like each morning I would do 2 sections. One would be logic reasoning and one would be either logic games or reading comprehension. And then at the end of the day, I would review my answers. And like, it's very important to review your answers and understand why you got something right or where you got something wrong. And honestly, if you do enough of these questions, I did it for 3 months, your score improves dramatically. And so the first 2.5 months, my score didn't improve much on my practice exams. Oh, and then on Saturdays, I would do a full practice exam. And then on Sunday, I would review that full practice exam. And my score wasn't improving much. And I was like, what in the world? I'm studying so hard. Like, why is it only going up a couple points? But then 2 weeks before the exam, I did a practice test and my score had jumped 12 points. And then when I actually took the test, I ended up getting in like the 94th percentile. And the year prior, I had gotten in like, I'd done terribly. So with that said, like, I think it's really good to just be regimented and like trust the process and find someone who did well in the LSAT and ask them like, what did they do? Like, this is the strategy that worked for me, but that was also 13 years ago. But yeah, so I would say like, it was really 3 months of intense study. Okay, I see Sharice's question.
Sorry, you were going to read Sharice's question. I just commented on mute that my son is studying for the LSATs now. So
okay.
Not only going to have him listen to this, but I'm going to
yeah.
All right. Do you want me to read Sharice's question?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Sharice has asked, do you feel like your involvement in Greek has significantly played a role in furthering your career?
I am curious, Sharice, are you in a sorority?
Sharice, you want to come off mute? Oh, here.
Okay.
No, but I'm very interested. She responded.
Okay, awesome. I don't think it's necessary. I am very excited to be Greek right now because of Kamala running, even though Kamala and I are in different sororities. It's been lovely to see even the mobilization over the last 2 days. I think between like within the Black women community and then especially the Greek community, we all feel like this is our time to show the strength of being in a Divine Nine org. I will say that like being Greek definitely helps with networking for sure. And I think especially in early parts of the career, now I don't really see that as much. I don't really interact with like Delta lawyers as much. And part of it is I live in Portland now and there's like very few Black people here, but early in my career and also law school, like the person that was my best friend in law school, I noticed one day she had a Delta lanyard and I was like, oh, you're a Delta, me too. And that was the first day and we became best friends and she was a bridesmaid at my wedding. So, I mean, it's great to like as an opener, but I don't think it's necessary for being successful as a lawyer, but it's nice. And I definitely don't regret it at all. And I'm very close with a lot of my line sisters. And I think it was a very formative experience for me for other reasons.
Oh, Juliana has a question.
Hi, Nora. First of all, thank you for taking your time to speak with us today. I was reading your bio and I saw you have experience in many positions in many places. So I guess my question is, how do you know you're in the right place? And what are some things you notice that is kind of puts up a red flag for you at a job?
Yeah, Juliana, this is an excellent question. And I say that because my therapist has said this is my superpower, like knowing when to leave a place. And so I don't fully have maybe the expert answer, but I can tell you like what I do. First off, I follow my guts. Like I am very much about believing the signs of my body when it's like this place isn't serving me anymore. Well, let's see. I mean, some jobs, so the first 2 jobs I had, I left the first job because I got the clerkship with the judge. You don't really get to schedule that. It's like when the judge wants you to work for them, you work for them. And then after, while I was working for the judge, I had the option of either going back to my old job in New York or going somewhere else. And in my experience working for the judge, I felt like going back to the New York firm would kind of stagnate my growth, because it was a firm that had like 1,000 lawyers, and the junior lawyers basically do the boring grunt work on cases until they become partner, basically. So like I wouldn't have the opportunity to like argue in court or like take a deposition until maybe like 6, 7, 8 years of practice. And after watching people who are terrible in front of my judge, I was like, I want to get this practice now. Like if this, I can do better than this guy. And so I decided to go to a firm that would give me the opportunity to get that kind of practice experience right away. So I went to a firm in Denver, and there I got to do trials and arbitrations, which are basically confidential trials with like a former judge. They're like private, and that's kind of the appeal of them. But I got to take witnesses, argue motions in court, get to see the jury decide what to do in one of my cases. And so that was an amazing experience. But then after 4 years of being there, I got kind of bored. I was like, okay, I've done trials, I've done arbitrations. Am I just going to do this for the rest of my life? Like, I feel I've already accomplished this skill. So I need to find something else to do. But I wasn't sure what that would be. And I spent 1.5 years looking for another role. I just was like, I'm bored and I'm not growing. So maybe that's what it is. Like when you're not growing, it's like the time to move. And then I happened to see a job on LinkedIn to be a litigation attorney at this tech company that was growing. It was pretty small. And I would be the second litigation attorney at the company, meaning that there would be a lot of opportunity for me to do a bunch of things. So I interviewed with who would be my manager, and we just really clicked. And I was like, this person is really smart. And I feel like I would get along with them. And I feel like I will learn a lot from them. And so I didn't even know really what the company did. I like Googled it enough to like pass through the interview, but I did not like conceptualize or understand it until like months into the job. But I ended up taking that job, loved it. And then I found that job a little stressful for me, because I think it's important to work at a place where you believe in what they're selling. And I didn't think about that, because my job is of being a lawyer. Like usually you're just defending someone from getting sued. Like, why do you care about the product? But I realized that being in-house at a company, which is like just like working as a litigator at a company, means you are inherently advocating for this company in these legal briefs and filings. Like you're trying to not only say we're legally right, but you're also trying, it's almost like a PR job in a way, to be able to say like, my company is doing all these great things, plus we're not violating the law, judge. So like, you should rule in our favor. And the company I was with was like a great company in a lot of ways, but just like the product wasn't something that excited me. And so it was hard to work hard when I was like not fully invested in what they were selling. And so I started talking to friends and was like, this is how I'm feeling, but I'm not sure what to do. And then I had a friend who was working at Adobe that was like, well, they have a litigation opening. Somebody like unexpectedly resigned. Do you just want to talk to people there and see what they do? And like Adobe has products at least that you've heard of. So like you kind of know what they do. Like I knew Photoshop and PDF, but I didn't really know anything else. And I got to learn more about what the company does and its mission. And it made it feel like it would be a good place to move to. Like it'd be a place where I'm aligned with the vision of the company and would like the work I'm doing. And so that's why I made the move to Adobe, and I'm really happy here.
Thank you for the answer.
Yeah. I see Andrew's question. Andrew, that's an excellent question. I don't know, my dogs.
I'm going to read it for the recording, even though I just
Oh, yeah.
But the question is, what gets you up in the morning? What is your motivation or purpose?
Yeah. I mean, the straightforward answer is it's my dogs waking me up. But also like, I think ultimately what excites me each day is I get to work on really interesting, sophisticated cases that are like on the cutting edge of different areas of the law. And I feel like I get to learn so much. And when you learn how to master like a new area of the law or a new type of case, I just feel like it's like another like tool in my toolbox, you know, to just be like, oh, now I understand like class actions, or I know what to do when we get this kind of employment case or privacy case. It's just intellectually interesting. I feel like my job in a lot of ways now feels like law school, where I'm just like learning about a lot of different areas of the law. And I think ultimately, like my goal is to find some way to mentor the next generation of lawyers. I like very much, if I had all the money in the world, I would do something related to like helping first gen students, like just giving them advice and counseling, not only with like professional stuff, but family stuff is so hard. Especially when you're the oldest child or the daughter, like you just get a lot of like that kind of burden. And it's just really hard to feel like you should be empowered to just live for yourself. And so if I can find opportunities to tell people that, if I can work towards becoming super rich so I can have a nonprofit that does that, like those are the things that get me excited.
Well, I can say you don't need to be super rich to start it up.
Yeah.
Great, thank you for that. That's very helpful. And then I'm just watching too, because I would encourage people to jump in, raise your hand or type questions. But another one that I think, you know, it's so important, and I say this all the time, that it's and all of our interns heard this in our job readiness training class, that mistakes happen, they're inevitable, and it's what you learn from them and how you grow from them. That's important, and there are opportunities in that regard. Can you share with us maybe one of the bigger mistakes you've made that actually taught you a lot?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is not exactly a mistake, but it's definitely, I think, an obstacle or hurdle. I do agree that like every mistake you make is an opportunity, and it's about your attitude and fixing it. The first thing that came to mind was my performance, my first semester of law school. So like I mentioned at the beginning of the call, you interview for post-grad jobs after your first year. So like your first year grades are really important. And I came in pretty confident, having gone to like Hopkins and going to this top high school, that I was going to crush it. And I worked very, very hard. And then I did terrible. My grades were in the bottom 10% of the class, like the bottom 12 people. I got an email from the dean after grades came out being like, I'm concerned about your performance. Like, will you meet with me? And that was a huge setback because I am used to doing well, especially academically. And so I had a meltdown that day. I think whenever you get bad news, you should allow yourself the grace to have a meltdown for like 24 hours. And then you got to shake it off and figure out next steps. And so after that, I was like, okay, these grades are terrible and I am in debt from law school loans. I need a job and I need to figure out how to do better this semester. So I met with the dean, and I met with and she was helpful. Then I met with the advisor for BALSA, which is the Black Law Students Association. And I had not really worked with her. She was a professor because I just didn't know much about her, and I didn't think I would need a resource. But I went to her and I was like, hey, I'm in this terrible situation. What do I do? And she helped me come up with strategies to like improve my studying and over the next semester. So things like review your old exams to see what went wrong. Understand that your professors are all different, and they're like, you have to treat them like they're a different client. So like there are some professors that want you to give you the answer and talk about the theories behind the answer. Like, why does this law exist? And then there are some professors who just want the answer. And a couple other tips that she gave me. And then I was able to turn things around. So I went from like the bottom 12 in the class to getting dean's list. And I think it was really hard that semester because also in law school, you don't have exams until the end of the semester. So you only have one shot. And if you don't do well, then it's a wrap. And I had such bad luck leading into my spring semester exams. I had my laptop stolen and I hadn't backed up my notes. So I lost all my notes and outlines for the semester. I had to get my wisdom tooth pulled because my parents didn't believe in getting wisdom teeth pulled. They were like, they're perfectly fine teeth. So why would we do that? And then it started hurting me. So I need to get my wisdom tooth pulled. I was in Ithaca. There's only 2 oral surgeons in Ithaca. They're both booked. And I just went to my BALSA advisor and started crying in her office. I was like, I can't sleep because I'm in so much pain. And she found an oral surgeon an hour and a half away and found a third-year law student who would drive me there and back to get my tooth pulled, got my tooth pulled and took the exam the next day. So you just got to believe in yourself, and you really got to trust the process and just work hard. And I think ultimately, like, the key thing is when you make a mistake, do your best to just not make it again. Like, make sure that if you make a mistake a second time, you did everything in your power to avoid that mistake so you can live with yourself. Like, I knew if I still did poorly on those exams, I tried my best. I did everything I could. I went to like senior law students. I went to professors. I took every bit of advice and was humble enough to try it. And if it didn't work, then maybe law school just wasn't it for me. But it ended up working out, and ended up being a great story to tell during interviews that, like, yeah, I just had to like learn how to adjust. And people love that, because at the end of the day, you're not going to know everything at every job or every opportunity you have, but it's more of like, can you adjust to expectations, or are you confident enough to try a different strategy to get the job done? So not quite a mistake, but it was a good learning experience.
Great, thank you. So we've had a question. So impressed with your sharing about bad guidance. How do you keep your own sense of self-esteem high in the midst of the haters or the people who don't see your potential? I think that's a great question.
That's a great question. I think there's a couple different things that I do. One is I surround myself by my cheerleaders in a lot of ways. Like, I have friends who remind me when I'm down, like, hey, Nora, like, you got this, or you've done this before, or you've done something very similar. So like, I try to not engage in negativity, like things like with this election, for example. Like, I feel like there's a lot of people who are already like, oh, America will never elect a Black woman. I don't have time for that energy. I'm going to focus my energy on getting that done, or trying to get it done, versus just like wallowing in despair that we're doomed. Like, what is wallowing going to do for you? So I think it's important to surround yourself with positive people who like are going to empower you versus people who are going to try to bring you down, because there are those people. I also go to a therapist, and it's lovely. It's lovely not just to have the opportunity to process thoughts with someone, but it's also helpful because she reminds me of things that I forgot. So like, for example, someone reached out to me about a unique job opportunity. And I was like, oh, like, I don't know if I should take it. It doesn't feel right. And then she's like, well, Nora, remember we talked about this in like November 2022 when you were thinking about a new job then, and this is how you felt, and like you didn't want to do this. And I'm like, oh, thank you for reminding me of things, reminding me of my values and how I've handled these things before. And it's just a luxury to be able to process your feelings with someone who's paid to do it. And I think I also just remind myself of all the moments where I felt powerless and how far away I am from that. So like, I remember times in high school, I really struggled, in part because, you know, coming from an immigrant family, they had certain expectations of me. Like, I had the kind of parents who were like, you got a 90, why didn't you get 100? And it just kind of drained on me. But now I'm like, okay, I got that 90, but you know what? That 90 got me into Hopkins, that 90 got me to Cornell, and it got me to a great job. Like, so I try to remind myself of like all the things I've accomplished to get me here. And the people who are my cheerleaders also remind me of that. So, but yeah, it's very important to just be sacred about the things you give your energy to, because there's a lot of things that want to be negative in your life. I mean, I get rid of social media every once in a while, because I'm just like, this is draining. Let me just focus on me. But yeah, it's a muscle you have to exercise, and you have to be really intentional about protecting your energy so you remember your self-worth. But I'm always learning, so if anybody has any tips, let me know.
This has been an amazing conversation. I don't know, Sarima, did you have any last question before we do a wrap up?
And it's such a left field question. I was actually gonna ask you about like AI, because I know like there was this kind of wave of like AI is gonna take over all jobs, and I'm like, AI cannot be a lawyer, AI cannot be a litigator. So how when you heard about that, like what was your reaction to that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I listened in on a talk about AI, and someone described it as they did a comparison to like painting, like the painters of like Monet and Rembrandt. Like we still recognize how amazing their works are, and we still value them today, even though we have tools like Photoshop or like, you know, animation tools online. It's just another medium to like get your message across, and another medium to like help empower us to get our jobs done. Like, I don't think AI or anything will replicate who we are in a lot of ways. But AI is a very hot area, and Adobe is very interested in it. That is not my area of expertise. Maybe one day.
Thank you. It's such an odd
Yeah.
question.
No, no worries.
So this has been an amazing conversation, and you've dropped tons of wisdom on us already. I don't know, Nora, if you have any parting pearls of wisdom or a line of advice you can leave us with as we wrap up the call.
Yeah, of course. I think one, it's amazing that you all are participating in this, and it seems like you are all eager to just like learn more and grow, and that's really the key to success. I still feel very young and feel like I have a lot of time to grow, and I think I try to do things that you guys are doing now. And I think like the key message I would say as like a takeaway is, one, to believe in yourself, because there are other people who may not, but as long as you believe in yourself, I think you can accomplish a lot. And then to also, again, to trust the process. Like, you may not be the best, you may not feel like you belong in a room, but there's a reason why you're there. And just remember that as you go through whatever's next for you. And feel free truly to reach out to me about anything. My brothers don't listen to me. So if anybody else would like to talk about stuff, I'm happy to do that.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Nora, tremendously for your time and investment in us. And Sareem, as always, fantastic job. Thank you both. And thanks everybody for joining. We will put the recording up on our website within the next day or so. So if you want to go back and watch any of this again, you can do it hundreds of times. It'll be at the click of your mouse. So with that, we're done, and have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great job.